Today we have Jeff Larson from here in Las Vegas and Mike Ortiz from Miami, Florida. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Gonna be yeah. It's a difficult day. It's like it's
You can
it's a
be
difficult
honest.
time, but
You can be honest. We
yeah,
could be better, right? I agree with that. We could be better. But
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and you can look at it on both sides. It could go either way, right? It could be worse too. So
yeah, you're right, Jeff. Thank you for reminding us of that. Let's
we
hope
don't ever
that
want
it doesn't go that direction.
So keep the positive out there.
Yeah. So yeah, the conversation today is, definitely not going to be all positive. We'll
Yeah.
definitely have to talk about some negative things. But ultimately, my goal with everything I do in life is to turn things positive, right? So, this conversation will end up positive. And what we're talking about today is this theme of dignified hospitality that I've been talking about. And this is just, a restaurant industry with respect and dignity for all pieces involved. And last week, I had a couple of veteran, fine dining servers that I was speaking with that were talking about their perspective about where the industry was in the past and where it is currently as we're starting to reopen after the I don't know, stay-at-home orders or lockdown or whatever you called it, but and that was a pretty bleak conversation about. Ultimately, it was about the lack of dignity to the career of working in the restaurant industry.
the lack of dignity to the what?
The
of working?
career and the perception, the public's perception of the career of being a server. That ended up being the kind of end of the conversation and the important point that we got to. But today, I'm talking with you guys. You guys have a lot of experience with being vendors to the restaurant industry. And so that's going to allow us to talk a lot more about the supply chain. And so here we're not talking so much about service staff. We can talk about, all of the people involved in the supply chain of the restaurant industry. What were challenges they were facing before pandemic, which, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies before, right? As we know with the tea industry and all the work that we do to advocate for tea labor and all of that, but also, what are the things that we're dealing with right now, like with the response in the pandemic, and then, what we can do for the future to bring more dignity to the supply chain. So, I guess before getting started, I don't know, Jeff, do you want to just give a little introduction to your experience with these topics before we start diving deep into them?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jeff Larson. I actually originated starting in the restaurant side of it. So I've got everywhere from being a server to being a GM and then actually owning my own restaurant. And then I've also helped build companies like a local company called McCooney Wild Harvest. I went in there and we just ended up making it about 10 times bigger within 8 to 9 years. And it was interesting because I was selling like high-end foods to all the chefs in town. I had a lot to do with some of the supply chain stuff, especially finding new products and bringing them in for the chef's request. And then recently I took over as VP of sales and marketing for a company called New Leaf Tree Syrups, which you have fallen in love with, obviously. And it's a very organic, great way of harvesting the forest. And a gentleman named Michael Farrell, he was a doctor at Cornell University, took over their mapling program, and he tested all the trees. So we ended up finding out there's quite a few products out there that you can make from tree sap that isn't just maple syrup. So that's a little bit of my background. And
You said it's called New Leaf Tree Sap.
New Leaf Tree Syrups. So it's
Oh, cool. Okay,
tree syrups. Yeah, they're part of a company called the Forest Farmers.
cool. All right.
So the Forest Farmers, I never heard that part. The Forest Farmers is like a parent company for.
Because they do more than just the mapling part of it. So that's New Leaf Tree Syrup is actually the syrups, but they do forest conservation and they actually have families and camping and all that. And we've got about 10,000 acres in upstate New York and Vermont. And so they're just trying to make it a little more. And in the Vermont store, we've actually got a great shop where people can come in and see how it gets done, how the mapling process works, and see some of the cool things. But it's right there in that area where they've got all the milk farmers and the trees change. So at certain times of the year, they get busloads and busloads of people.
Cool. Yeah, no, I attest. Your product is awesome. I'm a big fan. I'm constantly, finding ways to cook with your syrups and get the word out and get people excited about it, including like on an industrial level too, not just like consumer or restaurant level, but like ready to drink. Like, we do a lot of, tea service for ready to drink companies, and they always, go for the high fructose corn syrup or even cane sugar. That's the healthy option. But I think even like your products could step up the quality, so much.
Well, the quality, and it's better to Mother Nature. Like, we're not hurting trees or killing trees. I mean, mapling is actually a natural process the tree would do anyways, because trees, like in the summertime, they bring in all the energy for themselves, and then as winter hits, it gets cold. That's what they use. They take that starches that are in the tree and they convert it over to sugar by eating it. So at the end of the year, like when spring and all that comes, they would naturally let the syrup out, the sap out anyways.
I had no idea. That's amazing.
So it's Mother Nature's truest way of making sugar. It doesn't hurt anything. You're not killing anything. Like cane sugar's nice, but they tear it up. It kills everything that lives there and the whole bit. So it's like cane sugar's not really eco-friendly as far as the actual landscape goes.
Mm.
Cool. So, Mike, do you want to give a little intro to your experience in the restaurant industry and what you're currently working on?
Yeah, sure. So I founded a small tea company called JoJo Tea back in 2011. I was introduced to tea at a little Buddhist temple and started doing Kung Fu tea and got obsessed with Kung Fu tea, and then got progressively more and more frustrated at not being able to find this is a little, there we go. I got progressively frustrated at not being able to find good tea anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I would try and sell tea to buddies of mine and sell tea to my friends. And then a little restaurant gave me an opportunity to sell tea there. And then I just found that by working with restaurants, I could have a much bigger cultural impact. I could introduce good tea to more people more quickly. And, but when I started the company, I didn't even know what an invoice was, I was a yoga teacher.
I take it you figured it out fast, though, what an invoice was.
Yeah, that's right.
How you get paid.
That's how you get paid.
That's right.
No invoice, no paid.
Signed and printed and dated. Yeah.
All those little details you gotta know,
Of course, and I mean, realistically, as a tea vendor, you're priority number 999 for a restaurant owner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he doesn't have butter, if he doesn't have meat, if he doesn't have, that's priority number 1, 2, whatever. So as far as vendors go, I think that it's like it's interesting because like service has always been kind of like integrated into it. Because if you don't have that attitude of service toward, and like I'm a romantic, poetic fool, right? And I feel like I have like a certain duty to tea, and that's just is what it is. I feel like I have a duty to our culture and to tea, to both of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
To kind of help introduce them to each other as much as possible. And because I feel like when people have tea together, they feel nice and they have a moment of peace, and they don't, get hung up on the things that they don't have in common, because that moment of the sip ties us together,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I actually knew something about tea until I met so it's like going to her place and then doing a tea experience was like, wow, this is like I used to see in the movies of the Japanese tea parties.
Yeah.
I thought I was drinking good tea, and it was in a whole, but it's like what everybody thinks good tea is, and until you meet somebody who really knows, and then you kind of get it. I didn't even think to put my setup up. I actually went out and bought everything now, so I can. So I got that nice green tea you gave me, and a couple of the other ones. So it's like.
Yeah. But anyway, but the point is that like since it was always a cultural mission, I went into it understanding that I was going to be treated like shit, because the restaurant industry is so difficult. You know, the restaurant industry, and I shouldn't even say that it's not that it's I mean, maybe difficult is a kind of an oversimplification. The restaurant industry is complex and manifold, and there are many moving parts that you need to juggle, you know, and it takes a lot of focus in order to do that. And in order to change any of it, that takes effort, you know. And and tea is not a priority in our culture, you know. So like when I recognized that, it made it a lot easier to pitch to as many restaurants as possible and just go pitch. You know what I mean? Today we have over 300 accounts, so we've been able to get some, you know, hotels and restaurants and even country clubs. You know, we've gotten some pretty interesting accounts. You know.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice when you can get in there with like teaching them, but also showing them the difference in the flavor profiles on that. You know, and you know,
of course.
Good areas to get tea, bad areas, and it's the story that I think sells everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You got that, and it's a story that's the difference, you know, between. It's like I think that's part of the richness of tea. That's what makes it kind of easy to sell as a tea salesman. Is that like there's so much to choose from. If somebody wants like the rich and the expensive and the creamy, and if somebody wants the funky and the stanky, and if somebody wants the crisp and the sweet, you know, like there's that. So, and if somebody wants the ancient and the mysterious, there's like all these different. It's like, okay, you know, it's all there. You know, there's so much depth that that the more we don't see, the better we can kind of like play with those, you know, those notes. I think, right?
Yeah, and I bet you, like when you got started, you learned to ask the right questions and, you know, find out what the customer really wants. You know, and a lot of times you do have to, but you know.
I wish I wish I did so much sooner. It's crazy, you know. I was so insistent upon, you know, it took me 6 months to convince myself to start selling like pyramid tea bags, because I wanted to only do loose leaf tea. You know, it's like, it took me years before I agreed to let bars make cocktails out of my tea. You know. Like and now it's like there's nothing better, you know.
Now you're like now you feel honored that they're using it to make a cocktail, you know, especially the bartenders have gotten so much better over the years.
Of course, and to like taste the way that it's affected the flavor profile of the cocktail, like the way that's going to educate the palate of the people drinking it is like so exciting.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, man. So like but I think it's also like it takes time, you know. It took me time anyway to like to learn to be flexible and to learn to like not be so stubborn about what I wanted to present and what I wanted my brand to mean and what I wanted the identity of the brand to be and the way that people would be introduced to the product. You know, it's like I think that like letting go of some of that is the only way for it to grow, you know. But it took me so long to learn that.
Yeah, well, because I mean, especially when you're first doing it, you're in your experience, and then you learn later that you need to get into their experience, because that's where, you know, the sales made, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah, and it's the way, you know, it's the way in. It's like the way
the way in, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I figured out pretty early in my career, you know, I had these wild mushrooms and all these crazy mushrooms to sell, so that was the way in, and then I focused off into all kinds of other stuff, seafood and this and that. And it was always, you know, mushrooms got you in the door, and then, you know, everything else just kind of follows.
What kind of mushrooms?
Like, you know, morels and chanterelles and all that from the wild. But then we also carried, you know, organic mushrooms. But then you also had the import mushrooms. And, you know, in a city like Vegas, you know, I love all these over here, the A-class mushrooms, but then the ones that sell the most were the organic ones that do mushroom mix boxes and that kind of stuff. I kind of went through the same thing where I wanted to sell this, and that's what I was selling. You had to, you know, be adoptable and see what the market demanded.
When was that? Because I feel like the mushroom market has like exponentially quadruplified. You know what I'm saying? In the last like few years, now everybody knows what lion's mane and chaga and reishi and everybody knows what all those are. And, you know, back then, was that the case or no?
Not so much the lion's mane, but everybody kind of knew what morels were and chanterelles and, you know, hedgehogs and that kind of stuff. They knew the wild picked ones. Like lion's mane is actually usually a farm mushroom.
Right.
So it's really hard to find that kind of stuff in the wild. but they figured out how to do it. So, I mean, Lion's Made, actually, San Francisco was really the first market to have all that, because I get all these chefs going up to San Francisco. Jeff, can you give me these Lion's Made and this and that and this? Well, you had one place growing them in San Francisco, and it was like, no way.
Oh, my God, wow.
It's always a big disappointment. Hey, chef, sorry, man, we can't get those. But now you are starting to see those all over the place, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Mike, could you imagine if chefs came to us and was like, hey, I went to San Francisco and I had Da Hong Pao and I had Mi Long Shan and I had, Da Yu Ling Oolong from Taiwan. Can you give me that?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, I'd be like, where you been, bro?
So,
that drives me crazy when chefs that are like friends of mine like leave town. And, like, they're friends of mine, but they're, like, they don't get into the tea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then they leave town. And they come back and they're like, oh, yeah, I had a Longjing at Tea Drunk in New York. Did you from Hangzhou? I'm like, what do you even know what Hangzhou is? I've been trying to get you to drink Longjing from Hangzhou. It's like...
You try to get them to do it forever, they won't do it. And all of a sudden they go try it on there. But it's their free time, it's on their thing. They're like, well, this is really good.
That's good though, I guess, huh? It's like it builds a validation, it builds a credibility, and it's good that tea is like starting. Now it's like there's a network. You can go to Vegas and have good tea. You can go to New York and have good tea. You can go to Miami and have good tea.
Yep.
And that's good. That validates it for those traveling chefs. That
Yeah, and you guys are doing teas too that are special in their own. That you're finding I know Elise knows every small farmer out there, and she has a personal relationship with them. And I imagine you do the same. Just. Especially if you're
not quite to the extent that Elise does. I mean, what we do is a little different, and I consider myself like lucky enough to work with Elise.
Yeah.
I think that we do work with bigger farms as well, but we are honestly and have been on a mission of transitioning all of it to fully organic farms, for example.
Yeah.
I started my company with I started my company with $2,000. So to build it up, but now but the exciting thing is that as we grow, our buying power grows, and as our volume grows, now all of a sudden, instead of having to buy from big distributors, we can go direct to the farm. In fact, Elise helped us put together a customized blend with heritage tea and with Hariali.
Yeah, and Yankee.
But for the morning after blend in particular, we did like an English breakfast blend made out of Assam Peko and baby amber red for Virgin Cruise Lines. And because when you do a blend for a cruise line, there's like volume in it,
Yeah.
So then it's like, man, that's when the dream comes true and the mission becomes possible. That you can actually like support these small farms directly. And my friendship with Elise has made that possible. So I first off, I thank Elise, I honor Elise, I respect Elise. It's wonderful. I appreciate your work.
Nice.
But isn't that incredible, Jeff? Like all single origin, small grower product getting onto a cruise ship, to be served as
awesome.
as a commodity product.
I'll have to talk to Mike at the end of this and get those syrups in there, man. I've got a couple of chef friends trying to do the same thing, get the syrups on some of these cruise lines and stuff, so we'll see. But
I mean, we'll see what the cruise industry looks like after the, once the lockdowns are. They were supposed to open April 1st, and they're opening now. They're planning on opening August 1st. I want to say.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll move along quicker instead of slower. I know there's a lot of scared people out there, but 100%. In reality, it's a germ, and it just they usually flush through, and then we can get back on with our lives.
But germs on a cruise ship are pretty scary, though.
Yeah. What's that?
The germs on a cruise ship are pretty scary, because it's a closed system. Well,
that's always been. That's like a big septic tank on those things.
Any kind of germ. Yeah, so that's why it's understandable being cautious. But, so it's cool. We've talked about, kind of the sexy side of our business, which is, presenting to chefs and getting our products presented in the restaurants. And I'm sure we could have fun talking about that all day, but today what I wanted to talk about was more to do with the other side of our business, which is like the supply chain and like where are our products coming from And in the context of what we're dealing with right now is kind of resilience, of how do we deal with this. And, Jeff, you recommended that I watch Bill Maher's recent show. He had Tom Colicchio, is that his name?
Colicchio, yeah. Colicchio.
Yeah, the guy from Top Chef. He's actually
he has strip steak locally, and the other steak at the Mirage too. So
yeah, he's famous. He's really high profile, and he took his time on his show not so much to talk about his own restaurants and his own plan of how he's going to open. His viewpoint was very pessimistic, not only about how we're going to be able to open, but he did give a lot of attention talking about the supply chain, which is really good because a lot of chefs aren't talking about that. They're not talking about how the supply chain was kind of turned upside down. When you close the restaurant industry, it completely, changed the distribution of how our food gets around. And
it collapsed. It basically collapsed the supply chain if you really think about it. I mean, one thing Colicchio mentioned on there was, cattle being killed for no reason and milk supplies just being dumped because,
Exactly.
like if you're set up to do a 5-gallon milk tub to send off to colleges and then send over to like restaurants and that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden you can't ship any of that, it all goes to waste. So it's really knocked it down. I mean, the beef industry right now is a prime example of a collapsed like ecosystem or whatever in America. And the ones that have survived as far as slaughterhouses and that, they're being bought up by the Chinese. So we really have stepped into it as America, but it just as all the way down the line, things have totally changed. And one thing I think a lot of people aren't remembering is that even before all this got started, there was a big corporate takeover out there. I think at least you saw a lot of it here in Vegas, where like the MGMs and the Caesars of the world, they were trying to just go with 1 or 2 vendors now instead of using some of the guys that are specialty and have
really
better products and stuff. Even right after I left my old job at McCooney, I sold a ton of mushrooms to MGM and that, and all of a sudden they signed a big contract with LA Specialty, which ends up being, they're all right, but they don't have the quality. They're not, when they're bringing wild mushrooms in, it's usually they're going best bid, so you're getting best bid style foods. So what I'm worried about coming back is that, it's just going to be the gradual elimination of like the McCoonies and Michael's Gourmet Pantry, which is locally, which is another guy who did the same thing you do. He started with $5,000 and 3 credit cards, and that's how he got his business going. And he's one of the best, they've got the best line of foods, I think, in town, as far as cheeses and meats and oils and all that kind of stuff. And it's a struggle because everything's turning into contracts. And that is even before this has happened. Mm-hmm. A lot of people said a lot of this happened for that same reason, is that corporations are taking over and they're eliminating the competition, basically. Fish. I sold a ton of fish in town. I have a feeling that's going to go away because now even Chef's Warehouse has their own fishery that they just bought. And you've got all the other, the big kingpins. So it's really, and a lot of like companies like mine bought from the smaller boats and the smaller fishermen and stuff, and it kept them alive. So when you take that away, like where McCooney doesn't even know if they're going to come back to Vegas, you're really screwed down the line when you're a small fisherman and that's what you did. It's like the big corporate guys, they just don't pay as well. They're not necessarily interested in just like a boat that goes, like a day boat that goes out. That's all we would buy from. Well, they'll buy from a boat that it's been out 14 days. You're out there catching halibut for 14 days. Guess what the ones at the bottom look like?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not as fresh, you're not going to have the quality. And it's just, small businesses in this country, I think I read, or even Colicchio talked about it, it's 11 million restaurateurs only. If you throw in the supply chain and the fishermen and the farmers, you're talking 20 million people in the United States that aren't going to have jobs to come back to. So it's really, not to make it all negative, but that's what we're fighting against now is that, it's just the restaurants right now are opening, right? Well, guess what? They're 50% occupancy. Everybody's scared out there that this is going to come back, so everybody's scared to have a full menu and that. So a lot of products, a lot of chefs are opening up with half menus too.
Yeah, that was something else I wanted to talk about, a trend that I've been reading about in several articles about chefs simplifying, their menus. So how is that going to affect what you predict, Jeff, in your business, do you think that tree syrups, unique tree syrups are gonna get the cut and not be on that simplified menu? Mike, do you think tea is gonna get the cut? Or
I mean, in reality, it is. Even like, so we have some unique syrups like birch syrup, and then some of the flavored ones. We've got the walnut one. They're just not going to even waste time with that. It's just going to be all maple. Now, can we be competitive in that? Because a lot of chefs, they're not like. You're trying to save money on your menu. You're not going to buy an organic maple syrup. You're going to get, go to the secondary ones, that have corn syrup added and all that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of people don't know out there, Aunt Jemima, Mrs. Butterworth, all that stuff. That is nothing to do with maple syrup. That is all that's corn syrup and flavor profiles that you're feeding your kids, and it has no natural goodness for your body. So, it's hard to compete when chefs are like they're gonna lock down their menus. I mean, I've already seen it. At Esther's, his menu is about half, but it's the part that he has though is fantastic. But he's not using as many products because they got to kind of worry too. If this weeds back up, are we going to have to shut down? And it's going to be the same with all the vendors because a lot of vendors out there when this happened, they had full stock of everything. Now the smart ones like Michael Gourmet Pantry and that they sold the soft cheeses to the public at a discount. So they're able to get rid of that stuff, but there's a lot of like companies like McCooney Wild Harvest that got stuck with fish, they got stuck with mushrooms, and because they didn't react as fast. I admit I did call them and tell them what we were doing down here, and I think they started toward the end, but by then that stuff starts about that. But everybody's scared that it's just going to shut down right now. So at least from the chefs I've talked to, and then talking to the different vendors in town.
We did something really really smart, I think. As soon as we saw what was going on in Wuhan, mm-hmm. and we saw that there were some shipping delays, we placed some orders. And then in Chinese New Year in particular, we placed a bunch of orders. I mean, we ordered a bunch of tea because we figured that there would be shipping delays. So we needed to get as much inventory on hand as possible. So we got, enough tea for like a year.
Yeah.
And then all of our clients closed. So now,
now you got a lot. Well, now you don't have to buy it next year.
Well, shit, man. No. Now we're sitting on we just threw all our cash into a big shipping container of inventory sitting in our warehouse, and now okay, everybody's closed. No revenue. My God.
Well, tea is a unique situation where it does have a long shelf life if it's stored well. Could you imagine doing that with something that did have a shelf life? Oh man, that would have been such a nightmare. Or even the animals, hearing about these these ranchers that are having to slaughter their animals because they're too much of a resource suck and they're not worth anything in the market. So literally having to kill and just waste your whole life's work is so heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, it's heartbreaking in the way that the government should have. I don't want to bring it out on the government, but if they would have helped a little bit, those animals could have been slaughtered and fed to families and that kind of stuff that could use. That's one thing Tom brought up yesterday. That but it's state level you can get them to agree to it, but it takes federal money to do programs like that. So. Yeah. As a country, we were pretty slow to react to that. So a lot of these animals were killed just over that kind of stuff. But, who expects something to take off like this? It's kind of, it's a tough call. But when you're wasting food like that, I don't know, man. It's like, I always thought there were freezers, so that's the part I didn't understand why you couldn't freeze the meat. But a lot of the packers, I guess, just don't have that availability.
Yeah. Yeah, when a system is so centralized and so, based on a certain, system, and then that gets turned, it's really hard to make changes. So, I guess if you guys agree with me, is it safe to say that the centralized corporate system is less resilient than the small scale?
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It makes me think of Andre the Giant trying to fight against a 6-year-old kid, and the 6-year-old kid is just and gone, and Andre the Giant is agility needs a certain nimbleness, right? Like we can't. The more monolithic, the less agile. You know, I mean, it's impossible for these monolithic. And like the difficult thing, right, is that like the whole like food industry did feed America. It did change the world. It did, you know what I mean? It did change the world in the 1800s. You know what I mean? Like it did represent it. Like the industrialized food system did have a purpose. I think that it's important to remember that like there is some good to some readily available food everywhere, right? And it's like, you know, yeah, it's just quick and convenient and available, period.
Yeah.
There's some good to that, right? But it's so out of balance now. I mean, it's so out of balance that it's unjustifiable. It's like it's not like and it makes the benefits of that like food industry, of the industrial food system, almost like it makes you want to hold it in contempt. You know what I mean? It makes you want to it makes me, I should say, it makes me want to hold it in contempt. It makes me not trust it. It makes me like, it's, you know, like it makes Cisco the bad guy no matter what. And that's like,
Well,
maybe that's not fair either.
Corporate. I mean, a lot of that goes back to corporate farms and all that. I mean, in the beginning, the farms were great because they were still planting organic vegetables and this. But you know, as time's gone on, you know, they've added.
Monsanto, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the poisons and all the other things they've done, and they've taken nutrients out because of the way they grow now. So, like me eating an apple now and me eating an apple when I was a kid at my grandmother's house is totally different. So you're not getting the nutrients, you're not getting the good stuff out of it just because they poisoned it out of it, basically. And then you add that stuff going into your stomach, and it's, I mean, just for health purposes, I mean, it's killing your bacteria and all kinds of stuff. But that, I mean, that's a different conversation. But I mean, food supply, I mean, it's like you said, the smaller guys aren't there, but guess what's going to happen when all this comes back? Those smaller guys really aren't going to be there. So you're not going to have like the McCoonies or some of these other small fishermen or small things. I mean, they're not getting the government money at the end of this. The corporations, why you have heard nothing through all this with corporations is because guess what? The government's going to bail them out again. I mean, they already know this money's coming, even though half of them have tax advantages. They don't even pay taxes. So it's just our system in a whole is not for the little guy, you know, and that's where we're going to lose 40% of the restaurants. I mean, think about that. 40% of the restaurants are never going to open. That's a lot. I mean, restaurants in your city, that is your city. That's the place where we all sit out and meet and we all have great conversations and we, you know, that's where we connect. So it's just, I find it devastating. You know, like one of the most famous restaurants in LA, Quentin Tarantino used to go there all the time and write scripts. It's never opening again. So we've got a lot. I mean, there's a lot of restaurants here. A lot of guys are holding on and fighting to get back, but you know, they're struggling like hell. You know, they're trying to keep their staff paid and all that fun stuff. And it, you know, when you only get 50% occupancy, guess what else you're getting? You know, 50% revenue. And even at the beginning, you couldn't even have a bar. You couldn't have this and that. So hopefully, we get back as quickly as possible and we get these restaurants filled up again, because if not, you know, we can lose the whole system except for the corporate restaurants. And I don't know how many of you guys like to go eat at corporate restaurants, but I never eat at corporate restaurants.
Yeah, me neither. I hate it.
I'll just eat at home.
I just don't go to Denny's or so it's like Applebee's or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, the food's not good. It's not healthy for you. And it's, you know.
Well, you know, I think, Jeff, those restaurants are also on the line, too, because their supply chains are also threatened as well, you know. So it's not just the mom and pops that are at risk. And I also want to remind us that restaurants were closing down even before the pandemic. You know, like that's the high turnover and all that was an issue even before pandemic. So.
Well, restaurants, I mean, for an investment, they're probably one of the roughest investments you can make out there. I mean, a typical restaurant, if you make 5 to 10% a year, you're really doing it right. You know, there's just so many things that can go wrong. I mean, you know, you get one bad review, you get this or that, I mean, it can destroy your reputation and cause you to lose. And, you know, there's also restaurants are also one of the businesses that it's kind of funny. A lot of people open restaurants that never worked at a restaurant. So you have those thrown in the thing, and that's going to be a big portion of who doesn't come back, because it's guys who say, I think I've saved my money and the rest of my life I want to run a restaurant. But they don't know anything about the business part of it. So, you know, I've consulted with restaurants where you go in and, they don't even know the numbers that they should be at, so,
Right.
for this or that. So there's a lot of those out there too. But, I worry about like, the restaurants I care about are my friends or chefs who took their own money and put it into it, that they know the industry. And you worry about those guys.
Yeah. You're worried about them before COVID.
Yeah, you were always, well, who's doing well and who's not, and you can see the guys that are filling the restaurant and they're doing it right, you kind of know, you can tell usually within the first 3 to 6 months who's going to make it and who's not,
Yeah, certainly.
It's that eye for detail. Restaurants probably one of those industries where it's just such an eye for detail, and you can't let stuff slip. You can't miss cleaning. You can't. There's just so many things that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
How has like, what are dining rooms in Vegas looking like right now? Miami just opened up like last Wednesday afternoon. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And and there are some restaurants that look just the same as before COVID.
Yeah.
And then there are other restaurants that the tables are really separated, and and there's
the new guidelines are that you have to remain 6 feet apart. And until this week, you could only have 5 people at a table. So now they've actually boosted it up till 10 because the governor out here just went to phase 2. But
you guys have been open for a while already, right?
Yeah, just a couple weeks. And a lot of restaurants out here actually started doing stuff like, I know the Stove did it, and James at Esther's, and I think Brian did one over at Sparrow and Wolf. But they were doing these dinners. Like there's a local company that basically they give you everything to cook at home, and then the chef would teach you how to cook. Like I know Kieran Wayne was doing cheese and wine classes. So a lot of guys really adopted fast and did that kind of stuff. And now that they're open again, they're still continuing that because the to-go industry took off. It's like, I was at Esther's the other day when I walked in there, and they literally at 5 o'clock had a board full of just to go. So it was just, people are still scared to go to the restaurant. But the restaurant, everything's 6 feet apart. You're not allowed to sit at the bar or counter areas. And, so it's separated, but they're being smart about it, how they're turning their tables and all that stuff. And the one thing restaurants are really kind of scary is that, your waiter is in a mask.
Yeah.
You get the smell of sanitation all over the place. So it's the wrong smells. And it's like the best part of a waiter is their personality, what they give you. And when you got somebody in a mask, you don't even see their pretty smile. You don't see their personality. You don't see their charm. So I imagine it's hurting tips for waiters and all that stuff too. And so it's not the same. Yeah. Everybody's in there trying to think it's the same experience, but it just isn't with the mask and stuff on. It's just not. So. That's the whole part of going to a restaurant, right? It's like that's why you're sitting there paying the extra money for that meal, and and that part of the charm is gone. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it comes back soon.
Yeah, talking with us with a mask on, it's not the same experience.
And he's gagging because he's not getting up there. He's sucking, the CO2.
Yeah, and they need to yell.
40% of the oxygen.
If there's any music on, they're like, "It's a."
It's exactly it. I'm like going, what? But
yeah, I'm not too closely friends with too many chefs other than Sheridan and Jenny, and they just recently reopened Every Grain for takeout only. But I am friends with a lot of people that work, that serve, and
that's difficult.
Yeah, so I've been asking them about their perspective on it, and yes, they want to get back to work. Like, we're all stir crazy. Like, we want some purpose and thing to do, and so that's what's motivated them to go back. But the overall consensus that I've heard so far is that the work environment has become more toxic than it was before, and it was already pretty toxic before.
Really?
Yeah, because management and the chefs, they're stressed the fuck out. Because they're all working.
Like that. Yeah, this is like HBO. I forgot we could cuss them.
They're working more hours. They probably took a salary cut, and they're working within these constrictions that are super stressful. And then staff comes in, and they're already yelling and biting people's head off from the moment staff comes in. And then staff is all in their mask all day, and they're like getting faint by the end of the day. And staff is also taking pay cuts. So this is like, I've been seeing this online. kitchens, even like the most high profile independent kitchens here in town, are like rotating through kitchen staff like crazy right now because their original staff, they're not coming back, right? This is a trend I've heard because they're being offered their job back, but then at a lower pay, and they're getting paid far more on unemployment. So they say no, and then they're having to like hire new staff and train them, and it's going to be lower quality work because the pay is lower just because of the numbers right now. So it's a stressful situation, but the one good thing I have heard consensus wise is that the customers are good right now because they're just so grateful to be out dining and having that experience. So people are being really polite and really nice, and the people that are going out to dine are part of the community that aren't afraid of COVID. So they're more relaxed, they're more chill with it. They probably don't like the smell of sanitation in the space, but they're more chill, and they're tipping really well. That's what I've heard. People are tipping really well, and that's what I was afraid of. I'm like, if you're at 50% capacity, not only is that 50% revenue, but that's 50% tips, and service staff, like their whole livelihood is on the tips. So
well, and if you're a bartender, you're only serving the dining room, you're not getting tipped at all.
Yeah,
it's tip of the bartenders, right? So.
But it's not necessarily 50% tips for the servers because, like, if, for example, if I have a restaurant that has 40 tables, right, then I need 10 servers. But then now I only have 20 tables. So now I only need 5 servers. You see what I'm saying? And then they still have the same amount of tables. There's that like, damn, now that I think about it, I'm regretting tipping so much in my last meal.
Well, it's a good thing because you also got to remember those servers like you haven't worked for a while.
I'm kidding, of course, I'm kidding. Yes, of course. I'm not being an asshole. I'm kidding.
But you haven't worked either, so you're like, I got a room full of tea and no cash.
Yeah. We're doing tipping the server.
We're gonna see like a drug dealer with a backpack on you and going down the street. Hey, I got some tea for you, man.
Exactly.
Little cash.
Yeah.
But I think that equation that you just brought up, Mike, is it's a little bit different now because there is additional need for staff because of all the extra sanitation and extra steps that have to go into the new protocols. So it's not an exact equation like what you said.
And you want to know the one thing that scares me the most is that going through the phases, right? So you got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, guess what never goes away on any of them?
The social distancing.
Yep. Yeah. So really? Social distancing remains the whole time. Even if this gets cured, they're not giving like the social distancing part. So I mean, I just, people catch colds and do that all the time. And yeah, COVID had its thing, but I hope that the numbers that are starting to come in stay true because then it really shows this was kind of a flu. But we will see in the future. But I mean, at some point, people like contact. I'm a hugger. It really sucks. I mean, I've got friends I'm still hugging, don't get me wrong, but, you're just not hugging. So some people don't want to be hugged. People are terrified out there right now. They're scared. And, and if you've got older relatives, all mine have passed away by now, so I'm not too worried about that. But a lot of people like yourself, you have mom and dad and all that. You're worried if you get sick, then you pass it on to them. So there's just a lot of it's a unique situation. So it's kind of, some people think this way, some people think that way, and it's a hard mix right now. And, as far as restaurants and all that, I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm praying to God that the second round doesn't come and we can get back to normal. But,
I heard some information last night from somebody that's a data scientist involved with COVID, and he was saying that actually the riots, the protests going on right now, could potentially give us a big spike that would actually distract from a second wave happening. So that's kind of a silver lining of a big spike happening right now due to that situation. That could help us avoid from a second wave next season, which could be worse. But
And they're finding out too that the people that are staying home are actually getting sicker than the people that are out and about, kind of, because you're out in the fresh air and stuff. So, like, if you have a big family, families tend to kind of pass things back and forth. So, it's interesting some of the doctors that are coming out and stuff, and you kind of wish they were all on the same page, but they're not, because it's all about medicine and pills.
Yeah.
The ones that are more holistic, on the holistic side, they're looking at it differently than some of the others. So at some point, hopefully, as a country, we come together and we get back to kind of where we were. But I mean, as far as what we were talking about before, the supply chain, I mean, who knows if that's going to recuperate the same? I mean, my worry is that it's all going to come back corporate, and you're just not going to have a lot of the choices that we always had before. So it's.
I think it's definitely going to be I think it's definitely going to be less. You know what I mean? I think that it's crazy to think that before COVID, the conversation was how difficult it was to be a small vendor for restaurants, and it's crazy to really dig the truth that it's going to be a lot harder moving forward.
Yeah.
But I think that it's still going to be possible at the end of the day, because there's always going to be small restaurants. There's always going to be cheap real estate available. There's always going to be a space that used to be a restaurant that is looking desperately for somebody to fill it, and there's going to be somebody else that's interested in opening a restaurant. There's always going to be but it's certainly going to be smaller. Mm-hmm. And the whole story was how difficult it was before this, and now it's going to be more difficult. So I guess that makes me think of the importance of mental health support for the restaurant industry. Before it was already important. Now it's going to be cutthroat.
Yeah, one of the funny thing is that mental health, or you're being stressed out, causes more illness than anything. So now you've had people sitting at home for 6, 7, 8, 9 months stressed out to hell. And when they come back, you don't think they might be a little mentally unstable? I mean, the two things that went up really big in this country are, alcoholism and drugs. Again, it's a big spike. Those are some of
the tobacco companies. The tobacco companies had their best.
All that stuff, you're sitting around all day and you're just, okay, I'm going to drink or whatever. But it's just, I even said this at the very beginning. I go, I'm more worried about the mental health of everybody being at home than even the COVID. And it's already spiked. There's been more suicides than there actually has been COVID victims. So there was two sides to always look at this, and everybody just so jumped on the bug that they just skipped everything else. And officially last week there's been more suicides in the U.S. than the COVID thing. So that part.
So to your point, Jeff, that the small guys, the small businesses are not going to survive this. Okay, let's
easily,
let's accept that. That's cool. I can accept that. So the businesses won't survive, but the people that are passionate about craft, and that includes service industry employees that no longer have work and are sitting at home, mm-hmm. still with this passion to serve and this passion to share good food and artisanal craft. And then the farmers that, and the soil and the plants, that stuff is still going to be there too, even though the businesses are gone. So what I want to try to envision is what can we be done with that? What kind of resilient programs could be outlined in a manifesto to give these folks direction, including the government direction of how to support these systems and support these folks to create value, utilizing their passion, and an idea that I have, and I'm going to open it up to you guys to kind of talk your dreams on it, but my idea is street food. I mean, I have so many friends that are servers or bartenders, and they would love to just have their own little small scale thing, even out of their own kitchen, and just share food with people with a very low overhead and make really good artisanal high quality craft. But of course the government and the food code and all that does not allow for that. So it would definitely require some legislation, and that'll be part of this manifesto. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you envision could be done with all of that value and effort that's still going to be left after this culling of the businesses.
I think it's a great opportunity for America to go back to the old days a little bit. I think, like you said, the artisanal guys. I mean, it seems even before this happened, I felt there was a great, like, a lot of specialty guys coming back, like specialty butchers and and farmers that care and all that. It's making, I think, especially the government needs to make it easier for those guys again. To be an organic farmer, it darn near kills you as a farmer because just all the extra things you got to do, which is kind of craziness because that is where food always came from. But hopefully the government starts relaxing it to get the search for being organic and that, I mean, organic is the food back when our grandparents were growing up. So, I mean, that's the part that always pissed me off. Why do we call it something special? Why don't we call the other food trash food? I mean, it's kind of what they're doing. I mean, it's trash, really bad for you, not the best, but it's cheap and it's, the public can get it cheaply. But I really hope we have an artisanal uprising, and you're seeing it even with chefs, with their breads. And, we've got some of the greatest pizza makers locally, and they are all passionate about what they do. And I think as long as the people keep the passion, it'll always survive. And people will, I mean, the market always demands you fill the hole. So as long as our chefs stay the same and they say, you've got to get that out there, I want this, and they stick to their guns, and then I think these new businesses will open up and you'll get small farmers and people growing beef and pigs or people growing these vegetables. And I think it'll be more relaxed. We're like the trend was kind of going this way anyways, but like you would tell a farmer, I need this, this, and this, and I need this, this, and this, and that's what he planned. And so I think that we have a great chance to go back. I mean, I think a lot of people have a great chance to have their business, but I think we can make it healthier again. I mean, it's obvious from around the world that GMOs don't work and that kind of stuff. And, nobody wants a meat that's been shot up with so many hormones that it changes your hormones. So I think hopefully it lets us take a step back and just be a better people again. Know what's going in our body, who our farmers are, and it makes it more local. So we're not shipping stuff all around the world, So I mean, I think that's really where the opportunity is going to lay. Now, what do you guys think?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Like I think about all the different artisans. Like I think so in Miami, right? There's that's where I come from and that's where I work. So that's my frame of reference. And within Miami, there's a really kick-ass, amazing community of food artisans, of coffee roasters, of bakers, of butchers, of corn grinders and taco makers. There's dumpling makers. Like there's just amazing, chefs and bartenders and mixologists and all this, right? And I think about like I'm like thinking out loud because I truthfully at least hadn't really thought of that, like and it's a big question, how can we all kind of band together? Is it like maybe like to create a union of like independent food artisans? In
Vegas, what about out there in Vegas? That already kind of exists because everybody, the chefs, everybody knows each other. We all push each other's restaurants. I always like when I have a friend open a restaurant or whatever, I put it on my blast and I do everything I can to support them. And I think that's just going to become more reality. I think it's to fight the corporations or whatever. I think that some of that already exists, and I think it's just building upon it more, right? So,
but that's not a union. That's an informal community. I mean, like a formal union, so that But and I don't know. For example, like a formal union, even just like a formal union to help food artisans have access to healthcare. Food artisans and their employees.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
That, I mean, something like that, I think, maybe that could, I think that is a good idea, I think that is a good idea. And I'm going to continue to think about this because please. I think that it's a really, I think that because it's like you say, Jeff, like there is this wonderful community, right? And me too, like my friend's opening up a restaurant, I give it a shout. Even like a friend's friend is opening a restaurant, I give it a shout and I send love, right?
That's a great idea though with the insurance. Is like to get them to go into a group, so you can get group insurance rates instead of being stuck, like the independents, so there's all kinds of things.
But there's also just by the nature of capitalism, right? There's a competition. You know what I mean? So I think that there's as wonderful as the community is, there is at the same time an inherent kind of competition, and I think that it's to figure out how to create collective power within that, I think would be really beneficial to that to this movement.
Yeah. Well, I think naturally, love and all that stuff. There's plenty of business out there for everyone. So it's not necessarily a competition. So when you join forces, like some of the local chefs here have, they push each other's restaurants. Because I'm saying there's a lot of public out there and they all need a good place to eat.
Right.
So I think that it's competition that you want to have the best plate or you want to have the best food in that. And yes, you are trying to drive people to your restaurant, but that doesn't mean you have to put down the next guy.
Right.
And I'm hoping through all this that's the part that goes away, that I think I've got to negatively talk about him to make mine better. And that's kind of the American mindset, is that we need to get away from that narrative. It's in politics, it's in everything. And we need to get more to,
that's right.
When you're feeling positive and you vibrate and you feel good, when you talk shit about somebody, guess what goes away? So we need to get back to the feel good and talking great about our friends and all that. And I think that changes the parameters on everything. And I think, there's competition. When you're doing a chef contest, you want to win the chef contest. But, I've got great chefs everywhere, but I want to eat at everybody's place. I don't want, I've got a couple where I go more, but I've got one that's kind of like my Cheers, a couple of them actually, but, I still go everywhere else. And I think it's great to see the talents of everybody and to always positively think that. I don't know. That's just where my mindset's gone the last 8 years or so, where I try to be positive for everybody and you try to help everybody on their journey. And I think if we do that again as a society and quit this, oh my God, we got to put this guy down to make me look better because I have no self-confidence, so I got to put him down to make myself feel better, right? And we have to get away from that mentality as a nation. We have to go back to every American is awesome and they have the right to work, and you create for yourself and you help everybody with their journey. And I think when we get back to that as a society, America will be great again. Keep this down the tube crap. It's just going to keep sucking down. We're going to keep, I don't know if you noticed, but we're going so
yeah.
I think we can do that with competitive chefs or whatever, but I think everything in society needs to go that direction. I don't know. Just a thought.
So, Mike, to your point about the unions, there are two coalitions. They're not official unions. One of them is, kind of on a path to look like it could evolve into a union. But the other one is the Restaurants Coalition, and that's the one that's really doing all the aggressive lobbying right now, and they've been successful. So that was the guy on Bill Maher the other night. He was talking about how they have extended the PPP loans to be longer for restaurants, and that they're lobbying for more relief, like bailout relief for the restaurants. That is the Independent Restaurants Coalition. And they're just advocating for restaurant industry, not for the workers necessarily, but for the restaurant industry to support the workers. And then there's another coalition that I've just learned about that's for workers specifically. It was founded by a group of really established veteran, service members. One of them ran and I actually, Mike, I learned this from Stefan's podcast, which I've been listening to like crazy since you told me about it. He was one of the interviewees from last year. He ran the cocktail program for the Momofuku group for 8 years.
Wow.
And he was talking about how supportive that environment was for his career and how dignifying, his time there was, and that he wants to extend that opportunity for other workers in the industry. But it's not a union just yet. And one of the main platforms that they're trying to implement and kind of plant seeds in the community and the overall perception of the industry is like getting rid of the tipping system, which that tends to be, a big issue for workers. But my observation on both of these organizations is that it's great to see the movement and the conversation and the initiative to do something. But both of those organizations are working within the same context that of we need to support the current way that restaurants work. And what I like to challenge to that initiative is like, let's think bigger. Like, let's like restructure everything and say, okay, this was good about that, and that's good about that, and kind of restructuring the whole way that prepared food gets distributed, and do it in a way where we can fucking get rid of the fast food, right? Because that's ultimately what we're competing with, right? Like the corporate things that you guys are saying that will ultimately survive over the small business. So I think thinking of food service outside of just the formal dining restaurant experience, and that's why I always say street food, because street food is such a great example, and like we're the only friggin' country in the world that doesn't have it, and I think that plays a big problem in why our food system is the way it is. Some of the best meals that I've had with the best ingredients, the freshest, best ingredients, were like just prepared in some lady's house, when I was living in the Caribbean, and like, I just paid $10 for a nice plate of her food, and it supported her, and it supported, all the farmers that she bought her stuff from. And then of course the customers got really great food. But, our current system here and all the legislation does not allow for that and does not support that. So yeah, that's
the funny thing. There are some places up. You go to Portland and Washington, and even down south. There are some of those out there. And why this has all been going on, a lot of chefs have been doing that stuff. Like Robert Lowy just had one yesterday at his house where he has a concept he wants to do. So he had everybody come down. He made $2 or $3 a taco or whatever, and he had some cool vegetables. Like he had this cactus that was just outstanding. But it's like you paid, everybody came to his house and they picked it up to go, or you sat down and ate right there. So you're right. There does seem to be a big, I'm starting to see a big thing where like a lot of chefs are doing that, where you're doing more of the informal, trucks or whatever they have to do. But
yeah, but even the food truck and those food stalls in Portland, they still have a very high operating cost to legally maintain. That, for affordable street food that's, prepared mindfully and within a certain sanitary code, that's what we have to figure out, right? Because I talked to my mom about it. My mom's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, but everybody's going to get sick because street food's dirty. And it's like,
not dirty. It's just like other food. It's like so funny.
It doesn't have to be dirty,
Where was that, Taiwan or something, or maybe it was Singapore? But there's a guy who was making street food for like 30, 40 years. He just got to fight like a 1-star Michelin.
Yeah, that's in Singapore, and that was a great story.
Yeah, that was Singapore. That was like that food looks so good. That's one thing great about like going to Asia, man. Everywhere you go, there's food. You're just
yeah. Yeah, and I think that plays a big role in why their food systems are so much more resilient than ours. So because it's more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. But
we spoke about street food the other day, and you were telling me about how cooking the food street side actually cleans off anything, and then beyond that, as long as you're working with clean food in the from the go. Everything's going to be fine and fresh, and as long as it's fresh, rather. And I hadn't really thought of that. Like, I never thought of the benefit of having street food, So, I think it's not something that people tend to think about as a solution. But I think that it's like, it's such an interesting thing, because I think about like you said, Jeff, being in Taipei and going to the night markets, and that the whole city is there, in Jinghong and Yunnan, there were these night markets. The whole city is there, in Chongqing and Chengdu, the whole city is there and eating and out, and it's like, and they're doing something that's, again, like in Miami, it's like we have like the nightclubs and the bars and the strip clubs and that's like what we're known for, So people are getting together at night, but they're not remembering it the next morning,
Yeah.
And if there's a place where people can commune and not have to deal with cokeheads punching you in the mouth because you stepped on their foot. Like, if everyone's just eating and happy, it's like that could have really wonderful repercussions for the culture, in that city.
Yeah.
Or town.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, like the whole night market thing, because like that's even up in question now if the night markets are going to come back immediately just because of all of the close contact and gathering of people. But I'm thinking of just even street food on a level of Auntie down the street.
Like opening up. Yeah.
Has a big pot of beans that she cooked all day, and you can for 50 cents go and buy a bowl of it. You're hungry, and Auntie can sell, 50 bowls of or not 50, but maybe 200 bowls of beans in the day and make enough money to, just bring some autonomy and some dignity to herself, like that level, or even someone that's out of work, a server that's out of work. I have so many friends that, are out of work right now. They work in the food industry. And they just love food, and they cook really great food, but they couldn't even dream about opening a restaurant or even a food truck, because you got to have like $150,000 at least to like set everything up and make sure all your licenses are right, and you're at the proper processing facility, which a lot of that food code stuff is baloney, but
it's all ways for the city to make money, right? You got to bring the fire guy in, you got to bring this guy, you got to do this and that, and then they always got something wrong. They got to come back, and it's a drain. I mean, it costs, the average restaurant costs about $500,000 to $1 million, like Esther's or Sparrow and Wolf or any of those. Yeah, $150,000 that'll get you a taco truck, maybe.
Yeah. I'm talking about very simple thing just to legally sell food. It's pretty prohibitive.
A fryer and a desktop and a refrigerator. That's it.
Fryer.
We have a friend from Alaska that's been watching on Facebook, and he just commented something about your point on unions, Mike. He says unions could do themselves a favor by getting back into training and certification and taking that responsibility away from the government. And some unions do, but not all. A lot of them seem like self-serving ways for organizers to make a living being lobbyists.
Right, so, that's true. Exactly, that's true too.
Yeah.
It's not like making the union is only as effective as who the leadership is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's why when I heard you say the word union, here. And not just here, I think in lots of cities, unions have always long been associated with organized crime and
corruption,
kind of corruption type stuff. So,
cooperative.
Yeah, organized crime is just the other side of government. So,
exactly.
When the government doesn't want to do something, they get organized crime, right?
Yeah.
Organized nothing. That's a bad joke.
That's funny. So, yeah, where do you guys see the markets going in that? I mean, like, especially with your business. I mean, you guys are definitely both smaller business people, and you have very unique products. But where do you see your comeback, and what are your struggles going to be?
I think booming. The future is bright, and I'm ready for it. So let's go. Elise? I think it's terrifying. I think like our revenue, our revenue's down like 75%, 80%.
Yeah.
I think that at the same time, like Miami again just opened up last week, so now the restaurants are opening. People that have 3-month-old invoices, I get a check in the mail today. Oh wow, so it's like
you're like,
yeah, they said, and like orders are coming in from the hotels again, so it's like so I'm hopeful. It's like I had this like I wrote this little thing for this blog called The Hungry Post, and I had this thought that it's like like I told you, like when I started working with the restaurants, I didn't like know what the hell I was doing, and like I started getting to know all the chefs, and then at the beginning of COVID, it was like, man, I knew all the chefs in Miami and all the dining rooms were packed and all the food was delicious and they would send me free food and it was like such like a miraculous dance. And now like the music just stopped, you know? And I feel like when the music comes back on, it's like, yeah, it's going to be good and it's going to be fun. But it was so fucking good. Like, it was
well, you're in the moment, you're in the best place, and now all of a sudden you're gonna be back in the 50s again.
Yeah, it's like music stops, lights on, boom, and it's like this was the best party of my life. You know, and then it's like, and it's like, yeah, there's gonna be other parties and there's gonna be other dances, but damn, right before COVID, it was so amazing when like the dining rooms were packed and the bars were packed and everybody was, you know, like it was just magic, you know. It was what we lived for, you know. Yeah. I feel like we were like we're like at the end of the day, like to bring it back to this like topic of service and hospitality, right? I feel like we're all losing practice, or we've all lost practice. You know what I mean? Like it's a practice at the end of the day, and the ones that are good at it see it as a practice. The ones that are good at it come back to it. You know what I mean? And all those like practitioners are just out of practice, you know. And I think that that's like it's gonna take not just people getting comfortable coming back to restaurants, but servers getting back into the groove of their rhythm of working with people and building those moments. You know what I mean? Under this new context.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, it takes 21 days to create a habit, good or bad. Well, we've been in bad habit for 90 days. You know? Yeah. So it is going to take people trusting their own brains. And it's all really just a thought process. You can either tell yourself good stuff or you can tell yourself bad stuff. It's all up to you. I mean, it's the difference between heaven and hell, right? You can create your own hell, you can create your own heaven. At some point, people just have to start being positive again. They have to start thinking, oh my God, it means more to me to be around somebody and be their friend and have great conversations than it does to worry about a germ and sit at home, right? So it's just kind of, I mean, I think the worst of the COVID's over, and hopefully the numbers that, you know, Stanford University and some of these places have come up with are in the right direction. And that it's not near as bad as we quite thought it was. So hopefully that parameter starts going out as bad as the other one did. And it really hasn't so far because, you know, right after one, now we've got the riot. So it's just kind of like, well, let's just keep them moving, you know what I mean? So hopefully.
Well, yeah. But I think that that's something that it's important to recognize at the same time, you know, it's that like, because it's like, I think that it's important to be positive. Absolutely. And I think that without being positive, nothing is going to get better. Right. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think it's important to acknowledge problems, because if we don't acknowledge problems, it's impossible to solve them. And I think that in that sense, it's important to acknowledge negative things. It's important to keep a perspective, you know. And I think that at a time like this and on a day like today, I don't think that it's fair and this is how I feel, right? I don't think that it's fair for three light-skinned people to talk about how important it is to be positive and to make your reality, you know. I think that it's like I'm not trying to bring it down. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to acknowledge a little bit of, you know, I'm a white-skinned kid with blonde hair or brown hair, blue eyes in Miami. Like, you know, I'm Cuban, but like in Miami, I'm treated like, you know, everybody's Cuban in Miami. So what the hell? Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, no matter what, we don't know how we would react to generational oppression, you know, and because of that, I just want to acknowledge that and say that I don't think
you're right.
That,
I mean, I have a lot of friends that, I mean, I'm sure Elise does too, that, you know, got involved here in Vegas and that, and you know, I give everyone my full support, but you know, you still have to remain yourself. You can't let it all suck in and then just tear you down. I mean, I'm hoping the country gets back to that direction. I mean, that's all we can hope for, but we also have to be careful that we always plant seeds. I watched what's happened over these last 3 to 6 months, and it's just a downward spiral. And at some time we've got to, you know, yank the brakes down. We got to start slowing it down and bring it back. Yeah. You know, the funny thing with our media and society as a whole is we always look at the bottom 10%. You know, I mean, you know, when you like politics, race relations, all that, it's always the outline that gets all the headlines, and that's what's driven in our head. And we have to remember that the other 80% on either side of the story are pretty neutral and pretty loving. Like, I have tons of Black friends, and I have tons of that. And I do understand some of the stuff they've got there, just because you can look throughout history. I mean, it's embarrassing. But if we head that way and we keep making those little outskirts the most important thing, we're just never going to move on as a society. Martin Luther King said it, and even a lot of the good leaders, with the different races have come out and said, look, we have to change the parameter. And the only way to change that is just to end the hate and go the other way. So I hope, as a nation and as a people, that we do that. Because there's a lot of star children out there and people that are in that zone. But if you just keep thinking about anything you think about, you attract to yourself. So it's just the law of attraction. If you want to harp on it, it's just going to keep coming. And we just, at some point we have to back off of it. But,
so, yeah, this subject is like more than we probably think, is so interrelated to the conversation that we've been having this whole time. That, like, the people that are going to suffer from the imminent collapse of our current food system are going to most negatively affect the marginalized folks, which tend to be people of color, and it's not just a color thing, it's just marginalized, and a lot of people that are marginalized tend to have, low value, jobs in food service, farming jobs, which are on the line. So, I think that thanks, Mike, for bringing this up. It's super connected. And I think if we keep that in our minds as we have these conversations about dreaming of like this manifesto of where food could go, I think ultimately autonomy and support of that autonomy is going to be really important for changing the situation for marginalized people, for people that are born into this marginalized state, like they have no choice. But, my only option of work is working in fast food, which is, not, as of right now, is not empowering. So
well, they're the only ones that got to work through it all. Because like fast food stayed open, so it's a different. It's always been a tough conversation, but I'm hoping as a nation we start getting it. But we've got to, and the funny thing is, it's not like from what I've seen through history of the United States, it's not so much even just race. It's the poor in general, how we've so marginalized them when we've taken away the mental health programs and different things to help people continue to grow. So I think that at some point, education's everything. And I think we've really dropped off as a nation as far as our education and reputation out there. So.
But I think that one thing that's really important here and is a challenge, right, is that I know that I am racist, like I know that I grew up in a culture where every night the bad guy in the news was a black man. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? I know that the other day when I found out that there were protests going on and that some of the protests had turned into a riot, and I was at a red light and a car came and stopped on the side of the road and two black guys came out, I got scared. And I know that that's because I'm racist. And I know that sucks. And I know that I hate that part of myself. But if I don't acknowledge that part of myself,
can't change it.
Then I'm always just going to be pretending that it doesn't exist and wondering why they're breaking windows. And that's really depressing, because when other people do it, it drives me crazy. So I think that it's like, yeah, we need to change as a nation, but I need to change as a person. And I think that until we take personal responsibility, and that means having difficult conversations, and that sucks. but what's the choice? Like not having the difficult conversation is bathing in our privilege. Not having the difficult conversation is Martin Luther King said, the complacent white man does more damage than the Klansman. Yeah. So then
you go through history, look at Hitler's whole regime. All the Germans that set back, so it's just, everybody has to learn to step up, and you see something bad going on, step up, And it's so funny. It's just a couple tweaks in your own brain that can make a big difference. It's just a couple of your thoughts changing, like even the wording changing, like,
100%. 100%. Being mindful of our words, Jesus.
Yeah.
Being mindful of our thoughts.
It's your words in your head. It's changing those to give you more powerful, make you the right person. Like, I mean, I noticed that. I've done a lot of personal work lately, and I noticed that I'm just happy all the time. Even right now, I am generally happy because I don't let that noise get into my head. I just don't. I mean, I know what's going on out there. I feel bad for everybody involved. I feel bad for, anybody that gets hurt. But it's just, if you let it just run you rampant, and then you go that way. And at the beginning of the COVID, I went that way. My posts were horrible. I was like, God, this is bullshit. I was so blowing everybody up. Like, they're lying. And I had proof for it, but it's not going to catch up till later. But I also finally, okay, Jeff, you got to go out, get back to you, go back to meditation, get your thoughts straight. And then I did that, I just became me again. It's just funny how it works, All of us do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, I apologize to you guys. Today is one of those days for me. I was telling Elise before we got on the phone, I was like, man, I'm bummed, man. I feel terrible. I feel upset. I feel angry. And yeah, it is what it is. I at the same time, it is like at least again, I thank you for giving us the opportunity to have a conversation about dignity and about service and about hospitality and about food, and about and about power, and about the power of connection and how we can, and for inviting me to think about, about how we can, inviting us to think about how we can actually do that. And it is a like a very, a fruitful thought, a good thought. It is a good topic to contemplate and ruminate on. So,
Yeah.
Well, it's like, a lot of the great teachers out there and people throughout history that have really made a difference. The one thing they've always taught is love, but it always starts from within. And it's us as a nation, as a society, to quit putting the blame on everybody else and it's his fault and their fault. It's like you have to change you. If you don't change you, nothing's going to change around you, because what you're focused on is what's going to come in your life. So I think as a society, I'm hoping at some point we can get back to that where it's not your fault or it's not Lisa's fault. Oh, Mike, you in Miami, you made my day bad because, you said something mean to me. We just got to get off of that stuff. You guys start taking personal responsibility, and I think that's where the change will happen. Because if we don't start stepping up for even our friends and families and people out there, it's like
and strangers.
Everybody.
Look, those are the ones that need to stand up for the most.
As a kid, when I go by everybody with a smile and I say hi to everybody. Everybody.
Yeah, 100%.
Gang members or people look this way or that way. So
and you make the world better.
Terrified. I feel I'll never get hurt out there.
You make the world you make the world better for doing that. You know what I mean? People that live in fear create resentment, create suspicion, and then create tension. And they make the world a shittier place just because they're afraid.
It makes them sick, right? Because if you're proven that stress and all that actually what breaks your brain out, which breaks your cells out, which makes you get sick. So if you stay in that hypertension, it's like there's a great, if everybody out there, there's a great show that's actually on Netflix right now. It's called Heal. I recommend it for everybody, but it talks about how your brain thinks and, just different holistic ways to get you back in line, and how they have found that more than medicines, more than food and all that, it is your hypertension, because you're staying in the all the time. You never relax. And by doing that, you're slowing down your body. So I think it causes a lot of problems. Like what do you think, at least like when you go to work, like the waiters they're going through right now because their managers and all that, they're in hypertension, which brings out hypertension. And I think everybody ends up going down.
I think they just need to drink more tea. Like, fucking A, let's drink some tea.
I know, no kidding, man. That tea party, I'm just like, you feel euphoric, you feel happy, it's just, that's where we need to get people to go, is get that tea thing going.
And if you need to buy any tea, call JoJo in Miami. He'll hook you up. He's got lots of it.
Hey, I didn't say it.
Dude, I loved Little Cuba out there and all that. I was only there for about 3 or 4 days, but man, it was just awesome out there.
Little Havana, dude. I got Miami. Like, I grew up down here, so I'm obviously biased. But man, I've seen quite a bit of the world, man. Thank God. Miami, I can't tell you how much I love Miami, man. It's such a unique city. It's so Caribbean. It's more like Santo Domingo than it is like Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. It's like it's so vibrant and unique in its culture and its dialect and its food and its rhythm. I don't know, man. I love Miami so much.
Yeah, when I went to Little Cuba, my son was with me and my ex or whatever. We went.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm sorry. Little Havana. Little Havana.
Havana.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Little Havana. Yeah. It's called Little Havana. That area.
When we went to that area, so we walked into this random place and they had books everywhere and they had every rum and all that. And the two ladies that were there, they decided to start singing and dancing and just doing that style of music. And my kid was up there dancing. It was like the best time of the whole vacation. It was just, because you just felt free and the people, everybody loved everybody down there. And it was funny. It reminded me of, just being in a good place because everybody I walked by, they said hi first too.
Yeah.
So that it's just a different culture that way, where everybody's happy, everybody waves. You say hi to people, they greet you back. They're not. New York and some of the cities, you say hi to them, they're like, oh, they want to just follow it. So,
no, it's hilarious, and like Little Havana, it has these characters, these guys that just and these ladies that walk up and down the streets of Little Havana every day for the past 40 years, And they're playing dominoes and they're smoking their cigar and they're having their mojito, their rum and coke, and they're dancing on the street and they're getting their hair cut. And it's such a world. It's such a little universe.
I just got like a half a day of it. I was like, oh my God, I got to go back here. So I was like, definitely want to get back out that way.
Cool. I'm glad you got to experience Little Havana, man. It's such a special place.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we all get back to work. My year was already planned out where I had trips out of the country, 5 of them, and so 4 of them been canceled. I did get to go to Germany and Dubai right before all this hit, but I'm supposed to go back to Paris, Australia. There was a chance to go to China, and even get bouncing around the States. So hopefully we can all get back to a normal world and do some travel. That's been my goal for a while. I just want to travel for a while.
Yeah, me too, man. I was supposed to be in China in March. Yeah, I think we were gonna meet up. I was gonna meet up with Elise.
Yeah, well, remember, I was the one that hit you up. Like the second I heard about what was going on in Wuhan, I was like, Mike, I don't think this is gonna work.
Right.
Like if you just looked at the timeline of containing the first round of SARS that we had years ago, that period was like 4 months, I believe. So, yeah, and this ended up being much worse than that, but. Yeah, if you guys have a few more minutes, there was one more thing I did want to talk about, Jeff, and that was like related to your travels, because you travel for going to like food shows, right?
Yeah.
So like if those food shows they're all being canceled, or they're being turned to virtual events, or like how do you think like specialty brands like ours, even if we're small businesses, we have like high value specialty products that could have a global reach. So if we don't have these food events to go to, like what do you think could be viable ways to stay connected with the global industry?
Well, like on my email every day now, I'm getting invited to like some of these food shows that are being canceled. They're having virtual meetings. So you can get on and talk to like the vendors or different people that you kind of targeted for those food shows. So I'm seeing it going that direction.
Have you gone to any of those virtual events yet?
I talked on a couple of them just to kind of check them out and see. And then, so a lot of them I'm also going in to see like people I've met and friends. But I hope that it's in the end, for now I see that working that way. But in the end, I personally have always felt human contact's better. But I'm also a guy who wants to talk to you on the phone. I don't want to text all day. Like people have full conversations on the text drive me completely crazy because I'm like, we can talk and be done in 5 minutes instead I'm typing for 20, trying to get, what I mean? So it's just, I don't know. I'm hoping it gets back to being more personal, but right now it's going the way of Zoom and Skype and all that thing. So, my character, I don't know. I like the human contact part. That's why I do what I do. So for me, it's been difficult, but it's just like, wow, we're my friends. We're the people I want to go see and all that. And it's funny, but because of how I kind of mindset of myself, it's like, I didn't get angry. I didn't get mad. It just, so I've got a new focus, or I've got a new universe is bringing something new right now.
Yeah.
So like, stuff like this. And obviously, I started that other business with some friends locally to see how that goes. But it's funny. I don't have as much passion for it because it's not something I'm passionate about. Like doing COVID supplies and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's fun. I mean, I guess it'll make money, but it's not like I'm out there going digging. Because if you love something, you don't really have to dig. I mean, I can see it in both of your faces. You love what you do. You guys have your tea and all that. And so if it makes $1 million or you just make it up to pay your bills, you're going to have the same smile on your faces because it's something you guys love. And I think that's the difference between life and a good life. I know. Don't get me wrong. But the other side feels a lot better because, you get to do more things, right? But, you're still going to grill out there and grind and you're still going to have that passion and love for it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, certainly. Yeah, absolutely. There's I think it's like there's the romanticization and the reality, and like the and like we all need to be able to afford to pay our bills, and to put some money away afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you just do it into your 80s, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I'll start saving when I'm 80.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's always good to save, but like times like this. If the U.S. does this every 10 years like they have lately, I mean, they take all your money and you start over again. So it's just kind of, to survive. I mean, at some point, hopefully our society doesn't keep going into just like survival mode, I mean, it would be nice to just keep saving and doing that. But we've all had to probably go into our savings and stuff to kind of dig out of a lot of this.
But, I think overall, my hope is that as vendors, we all continue to stay focused on supporting quality, supporting the small guy, because ultimately then, that ties into what you brought up, Mike, which is, creating those systemic changes to empower and mobilize folks that, for generations have been marginalized and discriminated, bring dignity,
that's right, dignity. I love that you use that word so much. It's because it's such a direct word, it's a word that's difficult to dismiss,
yeah. And it doesn't mean money. Like, we're not talking about money here. It doesn't mean like we need to hand out some money to them and pay them. It's like, no, it's just give them respect, let us be in a state of dignity. And in most cases, the most dignified people that I've met in my life weren't necessarily rich, and their life wasn't revolving around money. Their life was revolving around being connected to the things that are really important to them, which is their family, their community, and their food. You're connected and focused on those things and doing those things well. Dude, that's the best dignity that you can ask for,
Yeah. That's right.
Well, I mean, no matter of race, color, or how much money you make, I mean, the funny thing about the world is that the happiest people are the people that are grateful for everything are the poor.
Yeah.
More than the middle class, more than the rich. We're so worried about losing that. They don't have that to lose, but family means more to them. Love means more to them. And, I think sometimes that's a lesson to be learned for all of us.
Yeah.
But
they have a good contact with their food. They have a good contact with their family, and they have a good contact with their communities.
Yeah.
Like that's the other commonality. People, poor people that have nothing to lose, that are living on fast food and junk food. The happiness there is difficult. Because then you have your health problems and whatever. Just eating junk food just brings your energy down, but. You
blow up and you lose your energy. It's like it's not healthy.
Yeah. So I don't think that there's a whole lot of happiness in that. And then always just having this complex that you're not good enough and that you'll never be good enough. Like, that's not dignity. That's the systemic problem that's causing people to resort to whatever lifestyles, but. I always pull back from my experience when I was in the Peace Corps, and then now my experience with these tea farmers. These tea farmers are poor. Their business itself probably doesn't bring in more than $20,000 a year, but they have what they need. They have healthy soil, they have water, they have seeds, they have, good environment. They have their community close to them. They have their family with them, supporting each other. And there's just immense amount of dignity and happiness there. So I think that like food is a great platform for doing that, because food is community. It is, how people come together and people work together to create value together. So I think it's a really great like focus for us, and we are ambassadors of that. We are pieces of the value chain ourselves, and so we can use that platform to not only support our livelihoods, but also make those changes towards dignity.
Yeah. Well, family 100%. Meals around the world is always the most important meal, right?
That's right.
More of that. Yes, more of that.
One topic we did hit up too is like, just a quick throw in is that, at some point, hopefully our own government, and it's going to have to come down to everybody getting out there and voting and all that and to make the changes, is that they supplement the hell out of the bad food.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
I mean, farmers are, all that. And that really has to stop, that these corporations making bad food, which are making people sick, which keeps them in the hospital. I mean, it's like a bad triangle here,
Yeah.
Food, healthcare,
yeah.
and the whole bit, you know what I mean? It just kind of, it's like, wow. So hopefully at some point, America will get smart enough where we force the government to quit giving supplements to them. I'd rather supplement the organic farmers. I'd rather supplement the small farmers that are growing. And I think even at the end of this, you're going to see a lot of the money is going to go to the corporate restaurants and all that. And the small guys are going to be left out alone, even for the loans. So I think that is just something that we have to demand to change. And at some point, hopefully people get smart enough to do it,
Yeah, the farm subsidies, that is such a crazy, I think it's like $5 trillion a year. $5 trillion a year. Yeah, it might be more.
Yeah, going to corporate farms, that put poison in their food.
And Ted Turner is like one of the top collectors of those subsidies. Ted Turner, the fucking, he's a media guy. What the heck is he doing? And it's because he's got all these holdings, like ranch lands, and a lot of these subsidies are going to people to not produce food. It's such a weird backwards thing, and it does need to end. You're right about that. And, we want to talk about constitutional rights. So on Wednesday at the same time, I use this platform for doing a constitution study group. So if that's something that interests you guys, come back for that.
Cool.
Because a lot of people have been pulling the Constitution out and saying, hey, I've got constitutional right to not wear a mask and yada, yada. So I wanted to study that and find that out. And I came to learn that as individuals, we have our Bill of Rights, and a lot of those have to deal more with criminal, interactions, like how we're treated as criminals if we commit crimes. But when it comes to creating orders involving public safety, and when it comes to that type of stuff, we really actually don't have that much power. Our power lies in our voting, and also in communicating to our representatives of what we want them to do. So you're right. Yeah, we definitely need to pay a lot more attention to our voting. And you know what I think would be really great, and what I'm going to do, you're going to see me doing a lot more of this work, is like moving people together to become more powerful than the lobbyists. And the lobbyists are all in the hands of the corporations, and that's why, the Farm Bill is the way that it is. But there's a lot of people, and we're all connected on the internet now. So we can move that power together.
We almost have to invest into our own lobbyists as people, because there's nobody out there sticking up for us.
Yeah.
If you go over the last 50 years of laws and stuff being enforced in this country, nothing has helped us as far as a people. Everything has been advantage of the corporations, and corporations are called people now, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like and it's some Eisenhower announced to us years and years ago. He said that the lobbyists and them are taking over, and they're taking over government, and they're moving the focus from we the people to we the corporations. And it's hit. We're finally, people are starting to pay attention finally, but it's almost too late, because, you've got corporations, if they're the ones writing the bills now, and then they hand them to the guys that they paid for.
Yeah.
So it's almost, the forefathers back in the day, you want to talk about Constitution, they said when it quits working, you got to make the changes.
Yeah.
And we're getting kind of close to that point, because we were compared as a society right now, I would rate us as the Romans at the end of their run, because it is so corrupt. things aren't going for the people. It's all about the greed. I mean, these guys that go in to get $120,000 a year job, they're spending $10 million to get there, but when they come out, they're worth more than that $10 million. Mm-hmm. So, you know, becoming a senator or a congressman, I mean, why do you think congressmen stay there so long? They become multimillionaires. Mm-hmm. So at some point, we have to take that part of it away. And until that, it's going to be really difficult to change because, you know, the corporations have paid off both sides. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult to make changes when we can't elect the people that would make the changes because they're just not allowed to run.
Yeah.
Who knows? You know.
Our last amendment to the Constitution was in 1992. 1992 was the last amendment to the Constitution. It's been some time. Now we're ready. We're ready for a new one.
Well, it's just the average law that's passed, right? It's to protect corporations, not the people. I mean, even.
Well, yeah.
It's like, well, if you find out later my product's not good, you can't sue us. I mean, they did that with GMOs. You know, the smoking could have done that back in the day. They would have done it. I mean, it's like you've chose to lose, so it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting topic, and there's, you know, you can go a million miles on it. But, you know,
well, hey Jeff, you should try to come. You should try to come to one of my Wednesday meetings. I'd love to.
I will. Yeah, whatever.
All right, guys. I think we did it.
Had a great conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, nice to meet you, man. Send both of us each other's contact info.
I will.
I'd love to stay in contact with you and all that. And if I get out to Miami, I'll definitely come check you out. I was supposed to go to a food show out there too, so it was kind of.
Oh man, please do. Yeah, we've got a little tea room. We're moving to a different space, but nice. I'd love to show you our tea room. We can have some tea, and I can show you some restaurants around Miami. Absolutely, that'd be great. You're welcome anytime.
Nice.
You got to try some of the syrups too, Mike.
No, I'll bring.
Oh
we'll have to ship some out to them.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask you just a really quick question because you said you can make syrups and other products out of the maple.
Well, it's different maple, different trees. So I have a birch tree, which it really is savory in flavoring.
Wow.
So it's almost like a finishing sherry or balsamic. There's two different ones. There's one that's one that comes out right in the first 4 days, and then there's one that's after that it starts doing a natural fermentation, and so it becomes a little thicker and a lot more flavorful. But they're both savory, so you can put it over food and all that, and it doesn't have any sweetness off. Because birch is it's like just a quarter of the sugar as maple. But birch, if you go back through human history, was one of the medicines that all the ancients took. So birch trees were always considered very medicated or good for your body, like especially the barks and the sap. You know, and then I've got one in the middle that actually goes great with teas. I think it's the best one with teas, and that's a balsam fir, which is an infused tea. So because of the organic and then that flavor, it just really pops the flavor of tea, and you really don't get the syrup taste to it. So it's interesting. So I've got a walnut one, and we've got 4 other tree ones that are getting ready to come out.
I would love to taste them. I'm really interested. I'm really curious about it.
Yeah, no,
they work well in cocktails too.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool. All right, nice to meet you, Jeff.
All right, guys. Yeah, I'm gonna link you guys up. Make sure that happens. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and really healthy, awesome conversation. And we'll keep it going.
Yeah. This is something I could do every afternoon. It's always nice to talk.
Love you guys.